Welcome, guys, to Expressions of the One. I'm really excited to be back today with a very special guest. It's somebody that came into my life just at the start of what I would say was a cycle of time, which really led to my awakening. Tara Hegerty, she's a kinesiologist, she's an Akashic Records teacher, and she's an energy worker. But more than that, she is an amazing wife and mother. And I'm just so excited to have Tara here because we've been catching up for 20 minutes. We're both glowing because it's just amazing to connect Tara with people that have been on a similar journey of self-inquisition and growth. So thank you so much for coming today.
Thanks, Chris. And I know, wow, I just can't believe, we go all the way back, back in, we were saying 2010, like we were both living in Canada at the time. And here we are having this conversation 15 years later. It's wild when you think about it, right? And I still remember actually one moment, I actually didn't mention this before, but just feeling how easy it was to connect with your energy back then. And there was something really grounded and familiar about it. And so to be here now, sharing this space and talking about life all these years later, it honestly feels like such an honor. So thank you for
Oh,
having me.
amazing. You know what? The feeling actually now you bring it up was mutual. I just remember meeting you and Al and being like, there's all these young kids here at Whistler skiing, and there's like, it's all like this party lifestyle and whatever. And I'm just like, yeah, you guys are just so grounded and so together at the time. And so, yeah, it's been amazing to, as you said, reconnect now and just see how your family's grown, how you guys have grown. And, as we are just chatting about, I think that's the exciting part is being able to sort of reminisce a little bit and just understand like how much evolution has occurred in that period of time.
Yeah, it's been huge when you think about it, like 15 years. And yeah, here we are, married, few children, your life moves, all the things. So yeah.
Yeah. And I'm fascinated. So, back then, if I remember correctly, you were working at the old spaghetti factory as a waitress. I think I was a doorman at the bar there. But so how would you
Oh,
explain
come
to
on. I
someone
was
how?
working at the Crystal Lounge too. I was
Oh, that's
working
right.
there
You were
as
too.
well.
Sorry. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. And no,
Um,
the reason what brought me over to Canada was that I started to work for the Winter Olympic Games.
that's
And
right.
we loved it so much that we ended up just staying through summer and then the next winter, which is I think when we met as well. So
Yeah, right. Wow, you were there that long. That's
yeah.
crazy. I
Yeah.
look, it was such a great time. But so tell me though, how do you go from that, travel to then this journey of self like exploration to where you are now empowering others through your practice? Like my understanding, I'd love you to explain probably more about how you work with people and the joy that obviously that gives you, but the benefit you're finding people are getting right now.
Yeah. Honestly, you know, this path was never something I planned. It never is, right? It never is. But I came from the world of events and marketing, like really high pressure, fast-paced environments. Working on huge international productions, even, like we were talking about before with the Olympics. And you know what? It looked great on paper, but something always felt like a little off and like I was kind of living a life that wasn't fully mine. It was really interesting because when we then came back to Australia, everything started to kind of shift, after I went through a miscarriage. And it was like our first pregnancy, and we were so excited. And I remember at the 12-week scan, I was kind of like laying there and like looking up at the monitor, and the sonographer like was like taking a while, and I didn't know what I was looking at. And she ended up stepping outside of the room, and I was like, oh, that's really interesting. And then she came back in with someone else and gently kind of like had a scan. Sorry, my emotions are coming up again. She
Yeah.
was scanning as well, and she gently placed her hand on my arm, and she said, I'm so sorry, dear, like there's no heartbeat. And from there it was really interesting. Like time froze for me. Like everything around me felt like it kind of like suspended. Like I was like in this like bubble. But at the same time, every tiny little sound felt like really deafening. Like I could hear the hum of like the machine beside me, and it sounded like it was like right there in front of my face. Like I could hear the footsteps outside and the talking, and but it felt again like it was like right in front of me as well. And it was like it was interesting because it felt like my body was trying to like protect me. Like I was almost like, I felt like I was numbing out and also kind of going into this hyper awareness at the same time. And it was like being inside a dream, like I just couldn't kind of wake up from. Um, and soon I found out that I had like a miscarriage. So what that means is that my body thought it was still pregnant. And even though the baby had stopped growing weeks earlier, my body started to still kind of, the bloods and all that started to show up fine. So I ended up having some surgery, and the experience only, I feel like, added to some of the trauma that I was going through. I didn't feel safe. I didn't feel seen. And my body like was holding on to it all. And then months had passed and my cycle didn't return. And that's when I was diagnosed with Asherman syndrome. So Asherman syndrome is like when you've got all scar tissue inside of your uterus, and it's mostly likely caused from the procedure that happened. So pairing that physical trauma with some of the emotional trauma, it kicked off years of like treatment, of surgeries, of hormone therapy, IUI, IVF, you name it, we tried it. Like, and through that process, I was emotionally exhausted. We were financially stretched, and spiritually disconnected, and nothing in my life felt like mine anymore. Like, not my body, not my work, not my sense of purpose. Like, I started to kind of jump from job to job. It felt like I was just floating, but like not in a good way. Like,
Yeah.
and somewhere in the midst of that, I found meditation. Again, Al and I had kind of traveled to Thailand back in, I think it was around 2004, 5. And I really kind of got introduced to that concept. And I started to kind of pull on that again. And, I remember like going back to that, and eventually like we started to kind of reach the end of our like IVF journey, and we were kind of like down to our last embryo. We were looking at surrogacy at that point. And to fund it, we made the huge decision to sell our home and then move closer to the ocean. And I remember thinking at that time, like, I was like, you know what, if I can't have a baby, if children aren't part of my world, like, where do I want to be? And I'm like, yeah, I want to be near the ocean. And, at least that part of me felt like I was connected. Like, and I don't know what part of me wanted that connection, but it felt like it was right at the time. So, and while we are kind of like packing up, I went through this like little bookstore, and I saw this book on the shelf, and typical Virgo me, like, I'm like, oh, it's sticking out. Like, I'm going to whack it back in and just like tidy it up. Like, but it was like how to read the Akashic Records. And so I had no idea what it was, but it felt magnetic and I felt like I was getting like pulled into it. So like I bought it and I took it home and I read it like from cover to cover, and something in me cracked open then. And I started to kind of work quietly, working with the records, not just for myself. And as I did, like all these messages started to come through, and they felt like they were coming not from me, but from different perspectives. And not just about my own life, but about like a lot of the deep ancestral kind of grief as well. And I was like, oh, that's really interesting. And then I saw that, there's been some trauma on my grandma's side, who I actually connected with last night. So that was really beautiful. And that my mother, I'd also known that my mother had like a stillborn as well. So I realized that a lot of my body and my womb space was like holding on to like generations of like all this unspoken trauma. And that's why I was experiencing all this hardship around trying to have children. And so the records, like, they gave me language to what I hadn't fully, I couldn't explain, right? They gave me a way to understand, to like witness and finally start to release. And then literally a few months later, I had fully let go of trying
Yeah.
to control the outcome. You know what it's like with the universe.
Totally.
And I felt pregnant. I felt pregnant naturally, like no IVF, no medical interventions. It was just this beautiful miracle baby that kind of come into my life. And that was 9 years ago. And, since then, my path is like completely unfolded in ways I never expected. So I got certified in the Akashic Records. I studied holistic counseling, became a Reiki master. I completed my diploma in kinesiology. And so I didn't just become this mother, right? I became this beautiful open channel, this guide, and a space to hold other women navigating their own rebirths as well. And so as normal, right? Because we kind of look at it like what started off as like this personal healing journey turned into like this beautiful calling. And now I get to help women remember who they are, reconnect with their bodies, embody that soul level truth with them, and really step back into their power and their sovereignty. And I never saw this life coming at all, but it feels like exactly where I was always meant to be and always where I was supposed to land.
Yeah, it's so powerful, Tara, because it all unfolded exactly how it's meant to, right? I love there's a guy named Peter Cronin. He talks about, it happened the way it did because it did,
Mm.
and I often think that, there's not one atom of my past I would like to change because it could potentially change my entire current reality. And I love my life right now, and all that, the pain, the trauma, the suffering, the grief, all that has made me part of who I am today. And as you said, I just find it fascinating the way that it can unfold for our highest evolution. And
Mm.
I think even, yeah, like the beauty in being able to just let go. I think, so many of us
Yeah.
hold on to so many things, and that can be expectations of the future as much as it is of trauma of the past, and I think either way that can lead you down a slippery slope of unhappiness both ways.
Yeah, and you know what happened? It's like it was almost like stepping outside of the matrix, right? It kind of that was the little gateway that kind of like flipped me into a different frequency. And like I think of the Akashic Records as like, turning the radio signal. And it's like, okay, so the radio signal that I was in this 3D matrix that I was living in, that I thought that, going to uni, doing events and marketing and all of this was the right path for me. And when I tuned into a different frequency, the Akashic Records, they started to give me more messages and understanding. And I love that frequency. And I wanted to kind of experience that frequency a lot more. And so when I started to do that, it gave me these, as I said, like it felt like this 360 degrees of like where I was. Yes, I needed to kind of do that pathway of working and
Yeah.
experiencing the IVF to get to where I am. Because if I didn't have those experiences, I wouldn't be able to be in a place where I can actually be a really grounded, embodied woman to actually hold space for people to go through pain because I've experienced it. And so that becomes part of like my coding system for people to kind of come into, and that frequency that they tap into that they might not actually understand, but they feel. So you're right. Like when you kind of like look back on your life, like I wouldn't change anything either. Like that is who those experiences made who I am today. And I'm so grateful for that. Like, what a gift.
Mm.
And I can look back at that now and appreciate it. But at the time, like, far out, it was hard. Like, yeah, it like nearly broke our relationship up. My family would think we were crazy. Like, you're selling your house just to go down surrogacy, just to have children. Like, and all I was getting around me was like, just relax, it's okay. And I'm just thinking, like, no, it's so much
Yeah.
more than that. So yeah, I'm really glad that I followed my intuition at that point was like, I just want to be near the ocean. I just want to be, living a life that is resonant with me. And yeah, I keep coming back to the ocean, which is interesting. I'm very much a water baby. Like I go ocean swimming all the time. And so
Yeah.
I find myself like just being held and supported, up here. And it makes sense. Like, it's like I'm held by nature up here where I couldn't be held where I was in the
Yeah.
place that I was
Yeah.
experiencing all that pain.
You use a powerful word that, you've just mentioned is resonance, right? And as you talk about things like frequency, what's showing up for me is through all that journey you've gone through, and I know it personally for myself, you're able to set out a resonant frequency of safety for people. And
Mm.
so you become that crucible or environment for others to come and actually feel safe enough to start expressing so that they can tap into that intuition. Because I know for me, when I was all up in the mind, same programming, go to school, get a good job, career, money, house, happiness. And I did all that and was miserable, And so I was like, okay, same thing. There's just something's missing in that. But through that experience, what I've realized now is that, yeah, if we've been through that ourselves, we developed compassion, and I think from compassion there is an element as a set of safety. And I know in my relationship with Amber, that's what she's created for me.
Yeah.
She's been one of the first women in my life to make me feel truly safe to express my emotions. And through that, she'd call bullshit. She'd ask me a question, I'd give her an answer, and she's like, "Nope, that's bullshit. I can feel it. It's
Yeah.
okay. You can be truthful with me." And she had to work on it. She had to crack me open. But once she did, it's allowed me to grow and evolve. So I'm so grateful for her for that.
Yeah, and it's interesting you say that, like where she's calling bullshit on that, because I too agree. It's like words can lie, but the energy behind it never lies.
No.
And for women, like tapping into that in like intuitive sense of like, yeah, you're saying this, but you're actually meaning this. And it's probably the same for men, right? They're like,
Yeah.
to women, like you're saying this, but you actually mean this. It's like what we're tuning into that frequency is the energy behind the words, so the words can always kind of be misleading or misconceiving, but the energy behind them can be, yeah, really potent, and tapping into that is like so essential. And that's beautiful that that can be reflected in a relationship, especially with Amber. Like, yeah, that means there's that, again, that safety in your relationship, and there's this open communication too, which I think is so important in relationships, of having that space where you can have what I call nonviolent communication. It's like, I'm feeling this, I'm observing this, and I'm feeling this, and I want you to express what you're needing right now. Like that's where that safety comes from. And we're talking about resonance, and I'm going to circle back to that because
Yeah, yeah.
coming through is that, there's when we go through our life and going through, you know uh like going through and doing all the motions of school, of uni, of TAFE, or whatever it is, and then we go into work. What I'm finding is that our nervous systems are like almost like frozen in time. And so when they're frozen in time, like our nervous system can't like breathe and open and start to kind of find our own rhythm, because as we're moving through that, our nervous systems are frozen because it's not in resonance, it's not in alignment. And so when we start to go down the line of like, success and houses and money and all of that, and you're still not feeling happy, it's because it's not in like complete resonance, because you're not owning and allowing the nervous system to really start to show, or your body start to show you where you actually need to go. And that when you do start to align it, you feel so much safe. Like there's a sense of me of like, I never, like reflecting back on that, I've never actually done this actually, but like of all the time that I was like in corporate world, I never felt safe. I never felt like truly me. I never felt like I was embodying like all of me. And now, like in the work that I'm doing, now it's like there's this sense of safety, and yeah, it does come from, you're right, compassion. Like, and that's a huge thing of, that I tap into with meditation, is like this level, or this frequency of compassion that creates that safety, that you can start to kind of then help guide you along the path that is in alignment, that is in resonance with you.
Yeah, yeah. Like going further with that right now is for me personally starting to step into stability, like going the next step of really feeling embodied in what is my truth and who I am or who I'm showing up as, and not the identity that I'd built throughout
Mm.
my lifetime. And, I tell people, like, I love my parents. They're amazing. They did the best that they could and they've provided extremely well for me. But we were talking off camera, I think, about a bit of that generational trauma, stuff like that. And you realize these are collective patterns in consciousness that have been passed down for eons, like for what I believe to be, hundreds of thousands of years. And so we inherit those when we're quite young. And what was resonating with me then is that I realized I didn't feel safe at school. I didn't feel safe like going back to primary school, because I was always trying to be somebody that would win affection or love through achievement. It was always about if I can be a chameleon and I can fit in, I'll belong and I'll be safe. And what I realized was my entire life that was never true. And no matter what externally seemed to be the case, the smile on the face, the suits, the success, internally none of it felt right, and I found myself in environment after environment, group of friends, group of work colleagues over and over where I could make myself fit in, but the truest expression of myself never had the room to come through. And that's even right now, it's still a process of backwards and forwards to find that stability of this is who I am, this is my reality, this is how I show up. And I love it. And I don't need to be, it's unapologetic in nature, because I think if we all did that, the world would just be a very, very joy-filled place. And, we drop a lot of that external expectation, which I think shapes a lot of people's realities right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And, expectations is the root of all disappointment, right? And you're explaining like what I keep seeing in the Akashic Records is like we're sitting in this timeline and it hasn't been serving us, and we're wanting to shift out of that timeline and shift into a new timeline that is more kind of resonant with us. But to do that, there's a lot of trust. And I know we were talking about that earlier, is like there's a lot of trust and trust in not only yourself, but divine energy around you too, and divine wisdom that needs to come through. And to do that, you need to kind of open up your channel, crack open those parts of you that you have been possibly suppressing or oppressing over the years that are wanting to be come up to the surface to be heard. Because when we start to tune into those parts of ourselves, then that'll naturally flip us into a place of like, oh, this is where I'm supposed to be. Oh, isn't it interesting? All these things around me are starting to kind of like click into place. It's because I'm A, in resonance, and B, I'm creating the reality that's in alignment with who I am, because I feel safe, I feel calm. But I'm not calm, but I'm at a place where I don't feel like I need to have, the external kind of validation anymore. It's always just coming from an internal compass, and that is guiding me. And we're not taught that. Like we're not, through school and, parenting and our generations and that, we're not taught that. We get told, listen to your heart. What does that mean?
Yeah.
Like, how we listen to your heart? Yeah, okay. How do I do that? Like, and so, it's such a, for me, like to do that, it is part of that is creating space. And to create that space, it's like to slow down, to listen. Yeah. And like I keep getting shown also this quickening, like I'm almost getting like, a lot of my guides are like, come on, let's go. We need to get through this. Like, and there's this quickening. And I see this quickening showing up in a lot of people's lives. Like it's a lot in their breakdowns, the career that no longer fits, the relationship that no longer resonates, the restlessness, that kind of like aching that something real is out there, but they need to shed their false kind of like skins first. And that's scary, but through that whole process, it's sacred because you're honoring what that part of you is actually wanting to express.
Yeah. Yeah. So, so very true. I think with what you're saying there too, this is where I'm really fascinated. So please correct me if I'm wrong, but kinesiology is all about using the body's intelligence and wisdom, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
my
very.
understanding of the work that you do is the ability to tap into the intuitive side to maybe get to have guidance on where to look and how to show up, and but then being able to actually have tools such as kinesiology which allow you to help the body to actually maybe reset that nervous system or to open up those channels of that energy that can then express in more authentic ways maybe.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right, Chris. So kinesiology, they use muscle monitoring, right? And that's the traditional way. But what you're actually doing is you're tapping into the innate wisdom. So you're tapping into the subconscious and the parts of you that you may have judged or denied or avoided or suppressed over the years. And that's starting to show in the body as well. Because once, when your spirit kind of comes in at, initially, that flow of energy is always open. But at some point during your life, there's been some sort of like little disconnect. And what happens with that disconnect is then the mind starts to take over. And that's when we kind of go into evaluation and an analysis. And then as our mind starts to take over and compensate for that disconnection, it only has a finite amount of energy that it can pull on. So then it looks for other sources around it. So it starts to then look at other energy systems. So it looks at your chakra system, your meridian system that's connected to all your organs. And once that kind of has like run out, I guess the energy, like it only has finite amount of energy because that original source has kind of been disconnected. And so that's when the physical like symptoms start to come on board. So that's when you might get like thyroid issues, you might get back pain, you might get um headaches, all those types of things. And then the physical body is trying to like compensate for that disconnection of like that spirit flow that you originally had. And so when the body doesn't feel safe, what does it do? It goes outside of itself. It looks for and it looks for other things outside of itself, and it attaches. So that's when we talk about like attaching to certain beliefs, and we hold on to those things when we attach to certain addictions, whether that's like emotional eating, drugs, alcohol, or we attach to other people, and then we kind of create codependencies. And so the thing that I like about kinesiology is that we look at those lines of compensation and we start to clear them, so you can start to get that infinite flow coming back through your system. And generally the biggest one is like, from kinesiology, it doesn't work just with the emotional or spiritual, it works with the structural, because when we start to open and work with like the spine, so opening up the atlas and opening up the pelvic region, because that's where we hold a lot of tension in our body, like it'll go to our hips or our jaws. That's why we get so many issues like with our TMJ joint, a lot of pelvic issues like hip issues. But once we start to kind of work with that, even at a structural level, what that does is it opens up your spinal, like your spinal fluid, so your cerebral spinal fluid, which is, proven by lots of scientists out there, is that it holds photon particles, so light particles. And so that is your connection to the cosmic consciousness. So that is where that infinite source of energy is starting to come through. So yeah, kinesiology has so many, the way that I look at it is like holographically, like we can say you come in and you've got like some sort of back pain. So we look at that back pain and then we follow that line of compensation to start to open those pathways up. And it's sometimes emotional and spiritual, sometimes it's structural. So that's what I like about it, because we're looking at it holographically. We're not looking at it at just one line of information that the body holds, because the body holds so much at a cellular level, at a spiritual level, and it's so important that you have the tools to kind of like have that kind of 360 kind of view of what the body is actually doing. And once you start to unlock that, things start to shift very quickly, and you're like, wow, this is incredible. Yeah.
Yeah, it's been a journey. Like, I know for me, I would say, as a male in this reality right now, is I think a lot of men have been taught you've got to push through, right? And
Mm.
I think that's a very mental process, and the mind can force the body to do a lot of things that in its innate wisdom the body wouldn't do of its own
Yeah.
accord. And so the journey for me has been coming back to honoring the body in that regard. And I know, look, there's so much out there on muscle testing and whatnot, but there's a Dr. David Hawkins. He's just like written
Yeah.
some incredible books, and I love Power versus Force because it just really embodies what I think is the difference between that mental force that we sort of push through things, but true, authentic power comes from that cosmic consciousness you're talking about from within. And if we can honor the body that, I think, I know personally, I thought the body was just this meat suit that sort of got us through life, right? Like, until becoming aware that, hang on, what if it's actually the opposite? What if it isn't logic and the mind that truly gets us there? What if the mind and logic is a tool, but that true wisdom comes from a deeper knowing that's, I believe coming out of black holes in our cells effectively, like,
Yeah, absolutely. I too thought the same until I started to kind of dive more into kinesiology and the body side of things. And yeah, great book by David Hawkins, Power versus Force. If I could get anyone to read a book, it would be that one. It's a hard read, but it's a once you understand it and you start to get through it, it really does start to open something up in you as well. I like his book as well, Map of Consciousness. I really like how he kind of explains the levels and different levels of consciousness that we kind of move through, and the frequencies that we're tapping
yeah,
into as well. And yeah, and it's interesting, like kinesiology brings up so much of the body for the body to release, right? Because we're these vessels, like we're spirit in these beautiful vessels that are holding these information, and that information is generational, it's karmic. It's spiritual, it's emotional, and it's just like, wow. And once you start to realize that, whoa, my body has been carrying this ancestral trauma for, it's interesting because ancestral trauma can go back many, many, many generations, but it repeats every four. So, once you check into like, that fourth generation, you're like, and you start to clear that up and out, there's this lightness of the body. It's like, oh, thank you. Like now we can kind of keep moving through. And then you might run into your family on the weekend and things start to feel quite different around them. We're like, wow, that's really interesting because you're not holding that anymore in your body, in your system. You've released that not only for yourself, but for your relationship with your family, but it also has that ripple effect with your family too. So I find, the more empowered we become through our healing journey, the more our reality starts to kind of mirror that back to us. So our relationships with our family and our friends and that start to feel a lot more, I wouldn't say easeful, but there's something different like around it as well. It doesn't hold probably as much, I want to say tightness or heaviness that
Yep.
you have been carrying that you didn't realize you were carrying.
Yeah. I think I, you said the word there, like we, the body, a lot of us have used it as a storage device, and I don't think it is. Like, I think it's meant to be this creative outlet for us to experience our reality, to create and experience reality. But a lot of us hold on, and that's been this. It's a collective blueprint. I don't think it's like, I think sometimes we individualize too much stuff rather than go, hang on, this is pervasive on the planet, not just now, but for generations or for, millennia. And I think that's what this quickening that you talked about too is that people we're moving through a lot of this collective trauma at a rate now so that we can be lighter, that we can be moved through life in a more authentic way. And starting, for me personally anyway, it's more about tapping in now to the creative energy of life, the true life force that allows us to express in authentic ways beyond that conditioning. And you said it, I think like relatives are all relative, right? Like how many times have you, once you've done some healing work, you've gone to a family event, and what I've found is just maybe the triggers aren't there as much, like your family is still your family or your friends are still your friends, but the things that maybe triggered you in the past maybe don't bother you as much anymore, and you can appreciate the person for their idiosyncrasies and their ways of being without having a judgment around it, which really judgment, I think, is often what creates that discomfort as well, right? Because we think we know better in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah, and you tapped into creativity. Like, I think that's the best way that, like my favorite way to kind of allow source to speak through me is writing and is that creative place. For me, it's really simple things like touching the earth, making tea with intention, holding someone in their grief or the joy, or just being that mirror, and laughing, honestly, like when I laugh till I cry, I swear the whole grid like gets lighter.
Yeah.
And you're right, like in terms of allowing us just to bring that natural expression through, that can shift, things, in your reality, that you're experiencing too. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's I just, what, I love these conversations because the rabbit hole can go anywhere, right? Like you're talking about the holographic nature of reality before, right? And the way that you use that in clinic. And that's, I think it's very powerful if people can start to have some concept of that, because then you start to realize, hang on, I'm not a victim of my reality. I'm actually at the center of it, and infinite possibilities are available at all times. And that to me is empowering because, it means nothing's permanent as well. Like, that if we're having a really shit time, this too shall pass. Like, but also understanding that if we're in a really positive and empowered place, that you can expand upon that into even greater and more positive, empowered places. And so, yeah, I think I just love that concept. I think we're all in our own little holographic reality and we have these interactions with each other for these
Yeah.
combined holographic experiences, and then we move. Like I think, is my wife and kids, are they, they're not in my current reality at this moment in time, but I'll go back and then, their fields will light up and then we'll have this collective experience after this call. And then I go away again and they're no longer in my reality. So it's, yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like, what an image was coming up of like these kind of like little cages that we're putting ourselves into, like, and the cages are filled with a lot of the noise and the shoulds and the shame that we kind of built. And there's this also these beliefs, right, that your voice has to sound like someone else's to be valuable. But mostly it's like what I've noticed in that kind of cage and that kind of scenario that kind of just popped up is like there's this fear of being too much or not enough all at once. But in reality, we've just forgotten that expression isn't performance. It's like this beautiful prayer. And you're right, we can create our realities. And when we start to open up that cage and open up, like, open up the side and open the other side, it becomes a platform. And from that platform, then we can start to see, well, yeah, there is so many opportunities around me. I was just in this kind of like little boxed part of my life, but I've realized that anything is possible. And when you open that up, then that's when you start to become the true creator of your reality, because you start to shift into a different way of thinking and different way of operating, because that again hasn't been taught. Like that's something that you start to need to move through, and that's part of that awakening process, right? But once you do realize that you do have infinite possibilities around you, then the fear and all the shoulds and the shames start to come around. So then another big box starts to come around you. It's like, how do I keep moving through all of this life, it's just like it's like the next level. Like, sorry, they're showing me a Mario game. Like it feels like, the Mario game next level, like, yay.
Yeah.
Getting the flower and kind of getting bigger and then like, yeah, moving through. So yeah, reality it's such a interesting experience, on all different levels, that's for sure. It's
Well,
wild.
I'm fascinated with that. Like how do you embody this sort of wisdom with your kids? Like how, because I know I have some amazing conversation with my kiddos around some, what people would probably think is pretty out there stuff traditionally, but I'm just, I share what I believe with them, and then also I've come to the belief that I don't know everything. And actually the older I get, the less I know. Like I love the concept within mysticism that the question is more important than the answer, and that if we can be curious, I've mentioned it many times, I think, on this podcast, that I believe curiosity is one of the core attributes of God. Like, I think God is curious and God wants to create. And so it's not always about having the answers, it's about having the question. And so that's how I approach a lot of stuff with my kids. So I don't just say, hey, this is how reality is. I say, this is what I believe. But
Yeah.
I'll be interested in knowing what you guys believe. So yeah, like I know the age of your kiddos, you'd be having some great chats yourself right now.
Yeah, my children are so incredible, like so intuitive, so tapped in. Like my daughter was talking about her life and she's like, I've been at other places before, Mum. And I'm like, yeah, you have. So there's this like deep soul remembrance. And my son was outside and he's like, Mum, like the grass is purple and the bush over there, it's like blue. And if my mum or my parents heard that, they'd be like, oh no, it's not, it's green. And
Yeah.
I'm like, whoa, I'm like, what are you seeing? I'm like, is the grass green? And the same like it's all about the
Yeah.
questioning, like, or is it just above it? I was like, this kid's seeing auras, like he's picking up colors, like this is so special. And I'm like, can you draw it for me? And I want you to show and express me, because I feel like these two beautiful souls, like I see them, yes, as children, but I see them equal as two souls here to teach me and show me more. And what they're bringing into my world is this, yeah, level of curiosity. It's this level of play. It's a level of creativity. It's a level of time doesn't exist.
Yep.
Love the fact that children can go out and play and just be outside and just not care about timing or lunch or all the things that and structures that I kind of like grew up with. My dad was always like very like military, like, oh, lunch
Yeah.
at 12 o'clock, we're doing this or we're doing that. So it's like
Yeah.
having morning tea, lunch, afternoon tea.
Yeah.
Um, so Very similar to you, Chris, in terms of like just witnessing and observing, but then adding in more questions and curiosity. And I too, I don't want to put any kind of beliefs onto my children. So when they do ask a question, I always ask them first, well, what do you believe? Or what do you think? Or what do you feel in your heart is what's the answer? And generally what they come back with is just something like mind blowing. And I'm like, thank you so much. Because if I then said, well, this is how it is, and this is my belief, and everything like that, what I'm doing is I'm crumpling the energy. Like I'm not allowing it to flow. Like I'm pushing my beliefs and my kind of weight on it and my perspective on it, which is only so limited. But with children, because they're so tapped in, and at the age of, especially up to the age of 7, like they're so tapped into source and energy and life around them, that it's like this is such a beautiful opportunity to start to gain more knowledge and wisdom about life in itself. And yeah, it's I see them as my teachers, like biggest teachers. And I know I've had lives with both of them. Like I look at my daughter and she's like, she mothers me, and I'm like, far out, you have been my, and like I've gone back into meditation. I'm like, yep, you've definitely been my mum in a past life. We were talking about that in the car. She's like, I've been here before, right? But in not this life, in another life. I'm like, yep, we've definitely done this together before.
Yeah.
And same with my son. Like I've done so many lives with my son in so many different perspectives and experiences, as well. And there's this sense of like, he's my soul, like they're my soul family, and we're just having this kind of suspended reality kind of, in this lifetime, but we're here to help each other evolve and grow. And so yeah, it does come in, like religion kind of came up recently, and all the stories. And I just said, well, what do you think? Maybe we could get a book out. Maybe we could look at a little bit more around that, because some of the stories that they share here is very similar to the stories that they share in a different religion. It's just packaged up differently. So can we look at that? So yeah, I think children, sorry, my face is lit up because it's,
Of course it is. Yeah.
they, they're such a gift. And, when we open ourselves up to them, like I feel like we start to crack open our light as well. Our channel starts to become a lot more open and receptive too.
Yeah, for sure. Like it's, the human experience that I still go through myself is everything you've just said then around being so open and
Mhm.
great as a parent. But then there's the other side of me too, that I see myself in structure, in conditioning myself as a parent, where you know, I'll have experiences where, yeah, I raise my voice a little bit, or I change my tone. That's what my daughter's at to me. She's like, Dad, your tone. And I'm like, well, I asked you the question 3 times, Emma. So I think it's really important. Like, I know I'm going through that process of trying to get better at not judging myself when I'm not as enlightened as a parent as I would like to be, because they do bring up a lot of trauma too, right? Like, and my middle child Gabe, he's a spitting image of me, or was, like, when I was little. And so he's given me this gift of going, oh man, like, how much was I exactly like him as a toddler or as a little boy, and being able to really feel into it from a very visceral standpoint, that I'm like very connected with him in that way. But just knowing that, it's not about perfection, right? It's about growth. And I know my wife's great at it. I'm getting better at just owning our mess ups, owning our mistakes, and showing that our kids that we are human and that we're real and that we're not perfect, and that mummy and daddy make mistakes too, and it's not their fault. That's just how we're expressing.
Yeah, and that's the triggers, right? They're the little triggers in us. And when we do get triggered, it's like, how can we again gain more space so we can slow time down, so we can start to process it from not like a trauma response place, but from a place of, isn't this interesting? I'm very curious about how I'm reacting to this situation. And it always, for me, it comes down to getting out of the mind frequency and into the heart frequency. And the way that we get into the heart frequency is that we come into our feelings and needs. Okay, so I'm observing that My daughter is having, a little tantrum. I'm observing that my heart rate's going up. I'm observing that I'm like, I've, spoken to her quite sternly a couple times. Oh, I'm feeling like really like a lot of heat moving through my body. What am I needing right now? Well, I'm needing, for me, walking is so I'm like, okay, I'm needing some space and I'll just
Okay.
go for a little walk. And I'm honoring my need and I'm not reacting to her because she's not feeling that. I'm feeling that. And so why put uh my triggers or my trauma onto her? I need to move through that. But she's triggered that to bring that up. So I learn how to deal with that in a more productive way. And it's like because the triggers, the way that we react is it's very habitual and it's very quick. And so when we can start to kind of extend that space out just slightly, then we can start to kind of tune into, well, what is actually moving through me? And it's using the tools like, so what I'm referring to is nonviolent communication. So there's a fellow called Dr. Marshall Rosenberg, and he created this concept of non-violent communication and a way to kind of tap into that. And he's helped like tribes, issues with tribes fighting, to universities and big institutions and governments, to like marriages and everything like that, to start taking us from like the mind is like, oh, you did that to me. No, no, that's the mind. The heart is like, oh, I'm observing this, so it's off now. So I observe, I feel, I need, I action. And so once you start to kind of put those tools into play, you start to break, give yourself more space to allow to process from a more calmer space, then you can start to go, right, okay, well, I'm observing this is happening. I'm feeling this. I'm actually needing space. And I'll do it all the time. I'm like, mummy needs a space. Mummy's feeling so frustrated. I need space. And you know what I do? I go into the bathroom and I sit in there and I just kind of ground myself, connect myself, and like just breathe and like just I give myself 5 deep breaths and then I come back out. I'll sometimes do it in front of them so they can see me actually doing the breath work as well.
Visuals. Yep.
But they need to witness that as well. But they need to, because children don't necessarily understand what's going through our mind. But if we can verbally just say, I'm feeling this, I'm needing this, it helps support them. So same thing, like, with my son, he came home from school the other day and he's like, oh, this happened at school. I don't get into the story. I don't get into what that kid did to him or vice versa. I just get into the point of heart frequency. Well, how did that make you feel? Oh, mum, it made me feel so sad. I'm like, okay, well, what do you need? It's like, I just need a hug. And I'm like, fantastic. Give him a big hug, hold space for him. And you know what? Off he goes and he's fine. And it's just like, it's so simple. But if I sat there and like, oh, well, what did he say? And, well, I can't believe he said that. Like, we're tapping into a frequency of the story. And it's just like, and then we're creating that. And, and
Yeah.
it grows from there. But I'm just going to be like, well, what's the energy that's moving through you that we can like work with? Because that is embodying that experience. So he then knows how to kind of use that tool later on when that happens back again at school or another place, for
Yeah.
instance.
Yeah. No, that's such powerful, yeah, just such a powerful tip. I love that because I think kids, yeah, one of their main languages is emotion, right? Especially when they're nonverbal, as far as like my son Jude, who's not even one. He feels he's going to feel energy and emotion before he's going to learn the concepts of language.
Yeah,
I think that's with all of us, being able to embody that for a longer period of time enables us to be felt by our kids because they feel us either way, right? If it's just us being more
absolutely.
conscious of it
Yeah.
and how we're feeling. So, being mindful of time, we both have kids that we're going to have to get to school here this morning. I think that might be where we can wrap it up, Tara. But I just wanted to say thank you so much. Like, I've truly appreciated you coming on, investing your time in this expression today. And if people want to learn more about your work or find you, what's the best place for them to track you down?
Yeah, sure. So you can find me on Instagram at tara.hegerty, or on my website, which is tarahegerty.com. And Hegerty's Hegerty. A lot of people get that mixed up. But yeah, you can come on and say hi and come into my little world. You're always welcome. But yeah,
Um,
thank you, Chris, so very much. It was such an honor to connect with you, to have this conversation. I feel so, as I mentioned earlier, just deeply honored to be able to reconnect with you and just, yeah, can't wait to do it again.
Yeah, I think this will be the first of a few chats like this. So thanks again, Tara. And for anyone else out there, if you're enjoying these conversations, love you to go back and check out some of the other conversations because there's a lot around conscious parenting, relationships, and ultimately personal evolution. So thanks again and can't wait to see you guys in the next podcast.